Welcome to the Deep Dives, where we plunge into a stack of sources to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you, our curious listener.
That's right.
Today, we're unraveling a challenge almost everyone faces at some point: mastering a new language, specifically English, which is, well, increasingly vital in our connected world.
It really is everywhere.
It is. It's
Yeah.
a huge goal, right?
Yeah.
But the sheer volume of advice out there,
Yeah.
it can feel pretty daunting. So where do we even start cutting through all that noise?
Well, that's precisely what we're here for today. This deep dive is going to be a really comprehensive exploration into what it actually takes to become proficient in English as a non-native speaker.
Okay.
We're going to unpack the mental game, which is absolutely essential. You can't skip it. Then we'll dissect the actual linguistic hurdles you might face, and trust us, some of them are quite surprising.
I'll bet that.
And finally, we'll reveal the most effective strategies, the tools that can really help accelerate your learning journey.
Nice. And for this one, we've gathered quite a stack of insightful sources. We're drawing from some pretty rigorous academic research on language learning strategies, pronunciation.
Yeah, the technical stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But also practical tips on motivation, straight from real-world success stories. And even a lively, sometimes kind of fiery debate from a Change My View forum on Reddit.
Oh, those can get interesting.
They really can. So our mission, as always, is to just cut through all that noise, distill the most impactful insights into clear, actionable takeaways, and give you a genuine roadmap to English proficiency.
And remember, this deep dive is really custom tailored for you, the learner. You want to gain knowledge quickly, but also thoroughly. We want to spark those aha moments, give you clarity.
Make it make sense.
Exactly. And most importantly, make sure you don't feel overwhelmed by, just the sheer volume of information out there. So let's get started, because the very first step, it isn't actually about grammar books or apps at all.
Okay, intriguing. Let's plunge into that first layer then, your inner game. We're calling this part one. The inner game, cultivating a winning mindset for English learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because, let's be honest, we can talk about grammar rules and language apps all day long, but if your head isn't in the right space,
Yeah.
well, none of it really sticks, does it?
Not really, no. It just bounces off.
So what's the core truth here? What's the foundation for mindset in language learning?
You've hit on it precisely. The most fundamental truth, I think, looking across all these sources, is that learning English, or really any language, it's a journey, it's not a destination.
Right, not a finish line.
Exactly. You have to forget that magic pill fantasy, the idea that there's some secret shortcut to instant fluency. Our research confirms nobody's designed that magic pill.
And probably never will.
Probably not. And frankly, the whole concept might even be counterproductive, setting you up for disappointment.
It's funny. We all want things instantly these days. Everything's so fast-paced. But language learning, it's more like mastering an instrument, maybe, or transforming your fitness.
That's a great analogy. The gym analogy works really well here.
Yeah. It really needs consistent, patient effort. I mean, think about it. If you only hit the gym once a week, are you really going to sculpt those amazing flat abs? Probably not.
Unlikely. Maybe never.
Or if you only practice piano now and then, are you ever going to become a concert pianist? It just doesn't work that way. It's all about showing up consistently.
You hit the nail right on the head there. Fluency isn't some fixed peak you summit and then poof, you're done. It's much better to think of it as a continuous, evolving journey.
Okay.
One that you should embrace and actually enjoy, not just endure like some task you have to complete. I mean, consider this. No one ever truly finishes learning their first language, do they?
That's a really good point. I'm still learning new words.
We all are. We're constantly encountering new words, new phrases, new ways of expressing ourselves. English fluency is exactly the same. It's like a living, breathing muscle you constantly strengthen.
So the first step to actually improving your fluency is shifting that mindset, changing your expectations about the process.
Yes. Consistent, patient effort. That's what truly builds that linguistic muscle.
Okay, so consistency is key. But how do we make that consistent effort actually stick? Because, life gets in the way.
Right. Well, our sources reveal a principle that could be truly transformative for your learning, making it meaningful and personal.
Okay. Tell me more.
This is a real game changer. If something doesn't genuinely interest you, personally, you'll likely find your attention span shrinks down to, well, you know this thing, a goldfish.
Jackals.
Right. Very short.
And the information just won't stick. Your brain isn't built for boredom, essentially. When learning feels like a chore, you're literally fighting against your own cognitive architecture.
That makes sense. So our sources show that by aligning English learning with your existing passions, maybe it's gaming, cooking, True crime podcasts, even niche hobbies like, I don't know, competitive bird watching.
Whatever floats your boat. Yeah.
Exactly. You essentially trick your brain into thinking it's just doing more of what it already loves, and this turbocharges retention without you even feeling like you're really trying that hard.
I remember this so vividly from my own attempts at language learning. I tried learning Italian once, took a few courses. Some were great, others, oh boy.
Uh-oh.
I vividly recall one lesson. It was about a plane crash in the middle of nowhere and how the passengers survived.
Wow, okay. Cheerful.
Right. It was so morose, so utterly irrelevant to my life at the time. And the vocabulary was incredibly random, things like fuselage and emergency beacon. It just felt like such a massive waste of time.
Yeah, I can see that. Not exactly everyday conversation starter.
Not at all. There's truly nothing worse than being forced to study meaningless topics because your brain just actively resists it. You can feel it shutting down.
That's a critical point. When the material is irrelevant or just plain uninteresting, your brain struggles to forge those meaningful connections. It makes retention much, much harder.
So the power of choice is key.
Absolutely. Our sources emphasize that you get exponentially more out of the experience when you choose topics you genuinely enjoy. And this isn't just about making it fun, though that helps. It's about making learning profoundly effective by tapping into your natural curiosity, your intrinsic motivation.
Okay, so concrete examples. If you love reading, pick a book in English in a genre you already adore. Don't force yourself through Shakespeare if you hate it.
Right? Grab that fantasy novel or that thriller.
Exactly. Or if you're into game shows, go watch them on YouTube in English. You'll pick up idioms, conversational nuances, without even realizing it's study.
You absorb it naturally.
Or if music is your absolute passion, download the lyrics, sing along, look up every word you don't know.
Yeah.
The core idea is make it something you actually want to do, not just something you feel you have to do. It really does transform the whole experience.
Okay. Moving on from finding your passion, we need to talk about prioritizing English. This is where a lot of people stumble.
The commitment issue.
Exactly. It's not usually because they lack desire, but they struggle with making it a real commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you heard or maybe even said yourself, I really need to improve my English, BUT, I just don't have time.
Oh, constantly. I hear that no time excuse all the time, and honestly, I'm guilty of it myself in other areas. Wanting to be thinner while eyeing a piece of cake.
Chuckles, relatable.
It happens. But beyond that personal struggle, what do our sources say about making English a genuine priority when life feels so packed?
Well, the first, most crucial step is to consciously decide that English learning is a non-negotiable priority. We're often pulled in so many directions, right? Many of which we're not truly invested in. When there's too much on your plate, it's hard to know what takes precedence.
So you have to actively choose.
You do. And the solution here is strategic scheduling. It sounds simple, but it's powerfully effective. There's that old Scottish proverb, what may be done at any time will be done at no time.
Oh, that's good. Captures procrastination perfectly.
Doesn't it? You need to schedule a specific dedicated time for English with yourself and block it off in your calendar. Treat it like an important meeting you absolutely cannot miss.
Like an appointment.
Exactly. Whether you absorb best in the quiet of the morning or maybe you have a reliable 20 minutes free during your lunch break, find the best time for your brain and stick to it. No excuses.
That commitment transforms wishing into doing.
It does. And it also subtly signals to your brain, hey, this is important work we're doing now.
And when you are doing it, smart study is absolutely key. Maximize those efforts. There's a huge difference, our sources highlight, between a productive, focused hour
Totally folk.
and an hour where you're just kind of vaguely looking at something, not really sure what you're doing or why. It's quality over quantity.
Precisely. And part of that quality is having clear goals. Fluency on its own isn't a clear or actionable goal. It's too abstract, too big. It's like saying, I want to be rich. How do you measure that day to day?
Right. It's overwhelming.
You're much more likely to succeed if you set clear, short-term, attainable goals. When a goal feels positive and achievable, not tedious and overwhelming, it's easier to pursue. And crucially, it's easier to measure your progress, which gives you that sense of momentum.
Okay, so instead of I want to be fluent, a realistic goal could be something like, by the end of this month, I want to be able to have a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker about my daily routine.
Nice and specific.
Using at least 3 new idioms I learned. That's specific. Or maybe I will work on my speaking tasks every day for 2 weeks, recording myself and listening back.
Perfect. Measurable, time-bound.
When you can see your progress, when you have a clear path and a tangible outcome, it's just so much easier to get excited about hitting those goals you set for yourself.
And to keep that excitement high, let's talk about the power of rewards. This is a trick everyone likes, right? Rewarding yourself is simple, but incredibly powerful for keeping that motivation going.
Definitely. Positive reinforcement.
Our sources note it taps into fundamental human psychology. If you're feeling a bit down about a task or maybe dreading doing something, one proven way to make it easier is to agree with yourself on specific deliverables, specific small achievements that will justify a reward.
I like this. So you hit a small goal, you get a small treat.
Exactly. As soon as you hit one of those agreed upon results, take a moment to really reward yourself. For some tasks, maybe it's just 5 minutes of quiet relaxation, stepping away from the screen.
Or a good cup of coffee.
Or a fresh cup of gourmet coffee. Maybe a treat from your favorite bakery. For bigger, more demanding tasks, perhaps mastering a particularly tricky grammar point or finally holding that difficult conversation in English, you could reward yourself with something more substantial.
Like going to the cinema.
Yeah, see an English movie, or maybe even buying yourself that new gadget or item you've been eyeing. The point is, your progress might not seem like a big deal to others, but it is your progress, your effort.
So you have to celebrate it yourself.
You have to acknowledge it. Do it anyway. The more you acknowledge and reward yourself for honest progress, the more motivated you'll feel to reach those next milestones. It's just solid, positive reinforcement for your brain.
Okay, this journey involves effort, focus, rewards, but also, inevitably, mistakes.
Right. Oh, absolutely. You are going to make mistakes. Which leads us to a really crucial point, one our sources emphasize again and again. Embracing mistakes, learning to laugh at them even.
Don't fear the error. Learn from it.
Precisely.
Oh, this reminds me of my Italian class again. A perfect example of why you shouldn't be afraid to try, even if you sound silly. I once confidently announced to my classmates, "Ho scorreggiata."
Uh-oh. What did you think you were saying?
I thought I was saying I feel discouraged, struggling with the lesson.
Okay. And what did you actually say?
I actually said, quite emphatically, I farted.
Laughs.
Oh, no. The whole class just burst out laughing. I was absolutely mortified. I wanted the ground to just swallow me whole.
I can only imagine that's a truly classic example of how easily miscommunications can happen when you're learning. Humbling, but memorable.
Incredibly memorable. But instead of just dying of embarrassment, I started laughing too. And then we all had this long, very therapeutic discussion about funny, embarrassing mistakes we'd all made trying to speak a foreign language.
That's the best way to handle it.
And the profound moral of that story, which our sources echo strongly, is that you truly learn when you make new mistakes.
Yeah.
If you avoid trying new things, if you get upset or retreat into silence because you're afraid of errors, you're missing a huge fundamental opportunity to grow.
Mistakes are just data points for your brain, really. They show you where the boundaries are, what works and what doesn't. And it certainly helps, as you found, to surround yourself with people who will laugh with you, not at you, when you get it wrong. Find those supportive communities, whether online or in person, where it feels safe to be imperfect.
Yeah, that community aspect is huge.
Keep laughing, stay positive, and you'll find yourself making progress almost without realizing it because you're consistently pushing your boundaries in a safe space.
Okay, so embrace mistakes. What's the final piece of this mindset puzzle?
Patience and persistence. This is really the glue that holds everything together. You have to give yourself the necessary time to learn new vocabulary, new structures. It takes repetition.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Definitely not. And it's okay to forget words. That's not a failure. It's just a natural part of how memory works. Forgive yourself for those slips, but the key is never, ever give up.
Forgive, but don't quit.
That's the critical distinction. As one powerful quote from our sources puts it, a foreign language is like a frail, delicate muscle. If you do not use it, it weakens.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
But here's the crucial extension of that analogy. Just like a muscle, it's never too late to start working out again. Even if you take a break, maybe for weeks or months, your progress isn't entirely lost.
It comes back faster.
Often, yes, you can always pick it back up, and you'll likely find it returns quicker than the first time you learned it. Consistent, forgiving persistence. That's the key to long-term success.
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we've talked about getting your head in the right space, let's shift gears. Let's dive into part 2. Deconstructing English. Is it truly difficult?
Ah, the great debate.
It really is. This actually comes from a premise we saw in a Reddit Change My View thread, where someone boldly claimed English isn't difficult. And boy, did that spark a lively, sometimes heated discussion.
I can imagine, because what's truly fascinating here is how incredibly subjective the whole idea of language difficulty is. It depends almost entirely on your native language.
Where you're starting from.
Exactly. What might seem relatively easy for, say, a French speaker, because of all the shared Latin roots and vocabulary, could be incredibly hard for someone whose first language is Japanese or Mandarin. They have completely different grammatical structures, different sound
A
systems,
whole different world.
a whole different world. Our sources highlight this clearly. If your native language is English, or something structurally similar, like another Germanic or Romance language, then yeah, English might not seem too difficult to speak proficiently. But if it's not one of those, then English can indeed be incredibly challenging to learn. It's all about the linguistic distance between the languages.
Okay, so let's look at some arguments for English being easy, or at least maybe easier than some other languages. What makes it seem simpler on the surface?
Well, compared to languages like Latin or many Slavic languages, English largely lacks extensive conjugations for verbs.
You mean like different endings for I speak, you speak, he speaks?
Exactly. English has some, like the S for the third person singular present, but it's minimal compared to languages where almost every person and tense has a unique ending. And English doesn't have grammatical gender for nouns or adjectives.
That's a big one. No remembering if a table is masculine or feminine.
Right. That's
Yeah.
a massive simplification. And declensions different forms of nouns depending on their role in the sentence, like subject or object. English only really has that for pronouns. He versus him, she versus her.
Okay, so less memorization of endings and genders. What about verbs?
Verbs are relatively simple too, structurally. Most English verbs typically only require you to memorize one main word, and then you add things like s, s, s. So comment, comments, commented, commenting.
Compared to.
Well, contrast that with Latin verbs. You often need to memorize 4 principal parts just to start conjugating, and then apply complex rules across tons of tenses, moods, voices, leading to dozens, sometimes hundreds, of forms for a single verb.
Wow.
And for nouns and adjectives in English, usually just one main form, maybe a plural form, no gender agreement to worry about. So in that morphological aspect, they are, as one of our sources colorfully put it, simple as shit.
Chuckles. Okay. Straight to the point.
That stark simplicity in core morphology is definitely an advantage for learners coming from languages with more complex word endings.
But then we get to the other side of the coin. The arguments for English being difficult, often called the bastard language, right?
Yeah.
Because of its mixed up heritage.
Exactly. Affectionately or perhaps exasperatedly. One huge point our sources make is that English seems to have compensated for its simpler morphology, fewer complex word endings, fewer cases with more complicated syntax. Word order becomes much more rigid and important.
And it relies more heavily on things like modal verbs. Would, should, could.
Precisely. And prepositions in, on, at, by, and articles a and the. These little words carry a huge amount of grammatical weight and subtle meaning in English, which isn't always the case in other languages. It's almost as if English traded one kind of difficulty-complex word endings for another kind, complex sentence structures and reliance on small function words.
Can you give an example of that syntactic complexity?
Sure. Consider a sentence like this, which is grammatically correct, albeit a bit convoluted. I would have had to have had a wood saw had I seen the wood which I would have liked to have sawn.
Whoa. Okay, my brain hurts just hearing that.
Right. It demonstrates a really complex interplay of modal verbs like would and have, combined with perfect tenses and conditional structures. It's not about conjugating one verb correctly. It's about understanding these subtle shades of meaning created by sequences of auxiliary verbs and specific word order. It can feel like mental gymnastics for learners.
Definitely. And then there's the absolute nightmare. English pronunciation and spelling irregularity. This seems to be a major pain point for almost everyone.
It really is. And it's largely due to English's multilingual roots, as you said. It's absorbed vocabulary and spelling conventions from Old English, Latin, French, German, Norse, Greek, even Native American languages and others.
A real melting pot.
A real melting pot, which means there isn't really a consistent set of rules for how to pronounce different spellings. It's more like a collection of historical accidents frozen in time.
The examples are endless, aren't they?
Oh, completely. Our sources delight in listing them. Think about writhe, rot, and rain all have that D, but totally different sounds or no sound at all.
Right.
Or how pear sounds like where, but not like fear. You can shed a tear, like crying, because your shorts got a tear, like a rip in them. Same spelling, different pronunciation, different meaning.
And the F words.
Oh, the infamous O. Prow doesn't sound like dough, which doesn't sound like rough, which doesn't sound like cough, which doesn't sound like through. It's madness.
It really is. And then you have homophones, words spelled differently but sound the same.
Like yacht, ought, and bought, or two, and two.
And homographs spelled the same, pronounced differently, different meanings.
Like live, to reside, versus live, as in a live concert, or read, present tense, versus read, past tense. It's a minefield for learners trying to connect spelling to sound.
And don't forget those tricky the sounds. I know those trip up a lot of people.
They really do. English actually has two distinct the sounds. The voiced one, like in this or that, where your vocal cords vibrate, and the unvoiced one, like in think or three, which is just air. For many non-native speakers, these sounds are incredibly hard to produce correctly because their native language just doesn't have them.
Or they might have a similar sound, but it's not quite the same.
Exactly. Or the sound exists, but using it wrong might even be considered a speech impediment in their language. It's a subtle but significant hurdle that requires specific muscular training of the tongue and mouth. It's not just about knowing the sound exists.
Okay, so pronunciation and spelling are tough. What else makes English difficult?
Another huge area, our sources confirm, is idioms and non-literal language. As one source put it so well, half of everything you say is not literal.
Chuckles. That sounds about right.
Think about a simple everyday phrase like, how are you? If you translate that literally, word for word, into many other languages, it makes little sense or sounds very strange. It's an idiomatic chunk.
It's not really a question about how you are, physically or mentally.
Not usually, no. It's a greeting. Or consider the nuanced difference between something and anything, or some versus any. These distinctions are built into English grammar, but are completely foreign to speakers of languages that don't operate that way. And they're absolutely everywhere in English.
And then, phrasal verbs. The bane of many learners' existence.
Oh, absolutely. English is completely riddled with them. These are verbs combined with prepositions or adverbs like put up, put down, put up with.
And they create entirely new meanings, right?
Entirely new, often unpredictable meanings. Not only do they often sound incredibly similar, back up versus back down, but they can have vastly different meanings depending on that tiny little particle attached.
Can you give us that back example again?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
mind-boggling.
Sure. Just think of the variations on back, each with its own specific nuance. Back up, like supporting someone or reversing a car. Back someone up, meaning to support them. Back down, to yield in an argument. Back out, to withdraw from an agreement. Back in, to return. Put back, return something. Cut back on. Reduce consumption. Call back. Return a phone call. Get something back. Retrieve it. Get back. Return yourself. Get back at. Seek revenge. Get back on. Resume something. Get back to respond later. Get back into resume an interest. Get back with rekindle a relationship.
Oh, okay. That's a lot, just for back.
It's an enormous mental load for a learner to internalize all these subtle differences. You can't just guess the meaning from the parts.
No way. And then there are just the sheer number of exceptions to rules.
Yes. It often feels like practically everything in the English language is an exception, as one source notes with, I think, understandable exasperation.
It's not just irregular verbs.
Oh, it's far beyond irregular verbs. While many languages have conjugations and maybe some irregular verbs, English seems to have exceptions layered on top of exceptions in spelling, pronunciation, grammar, you name it. It makes it really difficult to learn just by memorizing rules. You almost have to learn each word or phrase individually in its specific context. It's a much slower, more iterative process than rule-based learning.
Which leads us perfectly into the idea of mother tongue interference, or L1 influence.
Exactly. This is when learners make mistakes because they're directly translating, often unconsciously, from their first language, L1.
Yeah.
It's incredibly common.
And it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely nothing. Our sources are very clear on this. It happens to every single person learning a new language. It's a natural part of the process.
So why does it happen so much with English?
Well, our sources highlight that direct translation from certain languages, like Portuguese, for example, into English, often doesn't work well because English has more of a Germanic influence structurally compared to the Latin roots of Portuguese.
So simple sentences might work?
Right. Eu amo meu cachorro perfectly translates to I love my dog. Simple subject-verb-object aligns. But this direct translation strategy isn't always successful for more complex structures, word order, or those function words we talked about.
So understanding how your native language interferes with English is key.
It's critical. It helps you anticipate where you're likely to make errors based on the differences between your L1 and English. It's about recognizing those patterns of interference so you can consciously work on them.
Okay, now that we've kind of deconstructed the language itself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, let's move into part three. Specific hurdles. Let's unpack the common challenges in English learning in more detail.
Right, getting even more granular.
Let's start with the pronunciation predicament, because this is about so much more than just making the right individual sounds, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. The primary aim for English learners, our sources strongly emphasize, shouldn't necessarily be achieving a perfect native accent. That's a common misconception, and honestly, it can lead to a lot of frustration.
So what is the goal then?
The goal is functional intelligibility. The main aim is simply that students be understood. Clear communication.
Okay.
Now, good pronunciation is clearly needed for intelligibility, but striving for a completely native accent, especially if you start learning as an adult, is very unlikely to be attained, according to the research. So the focus should always be on clear, effective communication, not some elusive, perhaps impossible perfection.
And what's crucial here, something that maybe gets overlooked, is the role of prosody. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, prosody. Think about it like music. Individual notes are like the phonetic sounds, the P in apple, the T in tree. But the rhythm, the melody, how you emphasize certain words, the rise and fall of your voice, that's prosody. Linguists call these suprasegmental features.
Suprasegmental. Got it.
And our deep dive reveals something fascinating. Errors in prosody, getting the stress, intonation, and rhythm wrong, often affect intelligibility more than errors in single sounds. Getting the melody wrong can make you harder to understand than hitting a slightly off-key note.
Wow. Okay, so the music matters more than the individual notes sometimes.
In terms of being understood, often yes. English is what we call a stress-timed language. This means stressed syllables tend to fall at relatively regular intervals, almost like a beat.
Like a drum beat.
Kind of. And the unstressed syllables get squeezed in between, spoken more quickly, and often involve vowel reduction, where vowel sounds become shorter, less distinct, often like an sound.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about computer versus how we actually say it. Computer, that first vowel gets reduced.
Right, okay. How does that compare to other languages?
We'll contrast this with syllable-timed languages. Examples often cited are Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese, and even some non-native varieties of English. In these languages, syllables are said to be more equal in timing, nearly equally stressed, and vowel reduction typically doesn't happen as much or in the same way.
So every syllable gets its moment in the sun, so to speak.
Pretty much. So a learner whose first language is syllable-timed might naturally try to apply that even rhythm to English. This can make their speech sound choppy or unnatural to a native English ear, and consequently harder to understand.
Because the expected rhythm is different.
Exactly. Take the example. Tom runs fast. 3 syllables, 3 stresses. Nice and even. Now, Meredith can run fast. 6 syllables. But in natural English speech, it still only gets about 3 main stresses. Meredith can run fast.
So those unstressed syllables get compressed.
They get compressed. And both sentences take approximately the same amount of time to say, despite the difference in syllable count. That difference in timing, that natural compression and vowel reduction, is a huge hurdle for many learners because it goes directly against the rhythm of their native tongue.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And in real-world speaking situations, there are even more challenges, right? Beyond just rhythm.
Oh, absolutely. Native English speakers often use the language very differently from how it's written or taught in textbooks. Colloquialisms, slang, idioms, they're rampant.
It's lacking the formal aspect, as one source put it.
Exactly, which makes it incredibly difficult for non-native speakers to understand quickly in real-time conversations. It can feel like trying to crack a secret code you weren't given the key to.
And teachers might not always help here.
Well, there's a significant misconception highlighted in our sources that can sometimes hinder intelligibility. Many teachers, perhaps focusing more on grammar or vocabulary, don't prioritize accent reduction or teaching proper pronunciation, especially the prosody part. They might believe that as long as basic comprehension and communication happen in the classroom, that's sufficient.
But that's not enough for the real world.
It often isn't. This view overlooks the critical importance of intelligibility in authentic settings outside the classroom bubble. Communication between teachers and students, or between students who share a similar language background, might seem easy because they get used to each other's specific errors and accents.
They adapt to each other.
They adapt, but that doesn't provide a genuine environment for practicing the language with native speakers who expect a certain rhythm, intonation, and clarity. Mastering proper English pronunciation, especially those crucial prosodic elements, significantly contributes to improving speaking skills and, importantly, confidence in real-world interactions.
Okay, so pronunciation is a big one, especially prosody. Beyond that, let's talk grammar and syntax again, but focus on the common errors. Our sources categorize these into 5 main areas, right?
Yes, 5 consistently tricky areas for learners: sentence structure, English verb tenses, pronouns, prepositions, and spelling mistakes.
Let's break those down. Sentence structure and verb tenses.
Many errors here, as we touched on before, often stem directly from the influence of the native language. Learners try to apply L1 rules or engage in literal word-for-word translation, which frequently leads to grammatically incorrect or unnatural-sounding sentences in English. Getting the word order right, using the correct tense for the context, these are persistent challenges.
What about pronoun errors?
These frequently arise from a lack of agreement between pronouns and the subject or object they refer to, mixing up he and she, using it for people, or using the wrong possessive like his instead of her. These errors often happen because the learner's native language might not have such distinct gendered pronouns, or the agreement rules work differently.
And prepositions, those tiny words.
Tiny but mighty, words like in, on, at, for, to, with. They govern relationships between words and are crucial for clarity and specific meaning. Yet students often neglect to use these prepositions correctly, maybe using the wrong one or omitting one altogether, leading to awkward or ambiguous phrasing. There are so many nuances.
Definitely, and spelling mistakes. That seems straightforward, but
Well, spelling itself is tricky due to the irregularities we discussed, but our sources also noted that common errors in written communication are often attributed to the incorrect use or placement of punctuation marks, commas, apostrophes, periods, which can significantly affect clarity and meaning. So it's not just the letters, but how you structure the sentence visually, too.
okay. To make these challenges really concrete, let's look at those Brazilian mistakes examples again. Even though they're specific to Portuguese speakers, they really illustrate that universal L1 interference for all learners.
Exactly. They show how deeply our native language patterns can shape and sometimes trip up our English. Let's see how these play out, and as we go through them, maybe you, the listener, can think about similar interference patterns from your first language.
Good idea. Okay, first up was double negatives. English generally avoids them, but they're common elsewhere. The incorrect version
I couldn't do nothing about it.
and the correct English way.
I couldn't do anything about it. The rule in standard English is if you have a negative word at the start of the phrase, like couldn't or didn't, the second related word generally can't be another negative like nothing, none, or nobody.
It flips to an any word.
It flips to an any word, anything, anybody, anywhere. It's about maintaining a single negation within that clause.
Okay, next, that verb-noun pairing issue.
Yeah.
It's party time.
Right. While speakers of many languages might use a verb similar to make for parties, a common mistake in English is we made a party for her birthday.
But native speakers would say,
We'd naturally say, we had a party for her birthday. Or maybe, we threw a party. It's just a standard verb-noun collocation. Certain verbs just naturally pair with certain nouns in English, even if a direct translation suggests another verb. You have a party, you don't make one.
got it. Then there was shopping. This one highlights how a single word can have different meanings.
Exactly. Incorrectly, someone might say, I went to the shopping to buy a new jacket. In Brazilian Portuguese, shopping is the word for a shopping mall.
But in English,
In English, shopping is the activity. It's a gerund or participle. The physical place is a shopping mall, more common in the US, or a shopping center, more common in the UK.
yeah.
So you need that extra word mall or center to clarify you're talking about the place, not the action itself.
Okay, good distinction. Then, how many more? That tricky word order.
Yeah. The incorrect phrasing would be something like, I only have more 2 days of my holiday remaining, putting more before the number.
But in English,
In English, the number goes before more when you're talking about an additional quantity or duration. So it should be, I only have 2 more days of my holiday remaining. It's a subtle but consistent word order rule.
right, the classic 4 versus 2 confusion starting with reason.
Yes. Incorrectly, you might hear, Brazilians go to the beach a lot for relax. Here, the speaker is using for, followed by what looks like a noun derived from the verb to relax.
But the English rule is,
When you're giving the reason or purpose for doing something in English, you typically use to plus the base form infinitive of the verb, not for plus a noun or gerund in this structure. So it's Brazilians go to the beach a lot to relax.
and this often happens because the word in their L1 covers both meanings.
Often, yes. In Portuguese, the word para can mean for or to, depending on context. So distinguishing when English needs one or the other specifically for purpose can be tricky.
Okay, and a similar forto issue with transfer verbs.
Exactly. Verbs that involve transferring information or objects like, say, give, explain, bring. An incorrect sentence might be, I said for him that he shouldn't buy a new car.
And the correction.
For these transferring verbs, you generally use to before the indirect object, the person receiving the information or thing. So, I said to him that he shouldn't buy a new car. Or, bring the remote control to me. Explain to him what is happening.
Is there a tip for remembering this?
One good tip is to practice the pattern with common verbs. Give it to me, say it to me, bring it to me, explain it to me. Drilling that structure helps build it into your muscle memory.
Good one. And finally, that big grammatical hurdle. Ongoing actions from the past.
Yes, very common. An incorrect phrasing often heard is, I am learning English since I was at school, using the present continuous.
Because in their language, that might be correct.
Exactly. In some languages, like Portuguese, you might use the present tense or present continuous for this kind of ongoing action that started in the past. But Standard English requires a different structure for an uncompleted action that began in the past and is still continuing into the present.
Which tense is that?
We need the present perfect continuous tense. So the correct sentence is, I have been learning English since I was at school. This tense specifically connects the past starting point to the present continuation.
These examples really drive home how direct translation often just doesn't work for grammar, and how vital it is to understand the underlying English logic.
Absolutely. They perfectly illustrate that L1 interference in action.
Okay, moving beyond grammar and pronunciation hurdles, let's talk vocabulary development. It's more than just lists, right?
Oh, much more. It's often misunderstood as just memorizing a boring list of words from a dictionary, but our sources clearly state that vocabulary actually plays a central role in contextualized, meaningful language.
So it's not isolated.
Not at all. Acquiring vocabulary isn't just a separate skill. It greatly contributes to the development of all language skills. Reading comprehension, effective writing, clear listening, and fluent speaking. Knowing words is fundamental to everything else.
But it's not just about knowing the word exists.
Right. It's about knowing how to use it naturally, with the right nuances, in the right context. The challenges here include abstract words like democracy, justice, well-being, being significantly harder to truly grasp and use correctly than concrete ones like dog or table.
Easier to picture a dog.
Much easier. Also, words with overlapping meanings make it difficult to determine the correct usage. Think about the subtle differences between job, work, career, and profession, or say, tell, speak, and talk.
Those are tricky.
Very. Our sources also note that, frustratingly, similarities between English words and words in your native language can sometimes lead to confusion rather than help. These are called false friends.
Like library in English and libreria in Spanish, which means bookstore.
Exactly, that kind of thing. They look similar but mean different things, causing errors. And other factors like multi-word elements, those phrasal verbs again are idioms, irregularities in words, plural forms, past tenses, and proper word usage, collocations, words that naturally go together like make a mistake, not do a mistake, all contribute to the difficulty in truly mastering English vocabulary.
It's a complex web.
It really is.
And then there's the listening maze, oral communication comprehension. This is where many learners feel really overwhelmed.
Understandably so. Students often struggle with the rapid changes in context during a real conversation, which can cause a lot of confusion trying to follow along in real time.
And predicting what comes next.
That's hard too. It's difficult to predict speech, especially in unscripted, spontaneous situations like news reports, debates, or just casual chatter. You can't easily ask for repetitions or ask the speaker to slow down like you might in a classroom.
And the speed itself is an issue.
Yes, learners frequently struggle when speech contains fast pronounced sounds, like that vowel reduction we talked about, gonna for going to, wanna for want to, or connected speech where words blend together. These are elements that are hard to distinguish orally but aren't problematic when you see them written down. All these factors combine to make authentic listening a significant, multi-layered hurdle.
Okay, so we've laid out the mindset needed, we've deconstructed the language, and we've detailed the specific hurdles. Now, the hopeful part. Let's pivot to part 4. The strategic toolkit proven approaches to boost your English proficiency.
Yes, the solutions.
Let's start with some foundational methods. They might be older, but our sources say they still offer valuable building blocks, right?
Absolutely. Take the grammar translation method. It's very traditional, emphasizes explicit instruction of grammatical rules, vocabulary lists, translation exercises.
Sounds a bit dry.
It can be, yeah. But it excels at building a solid grammatical foundation, especially for understanding complex written texts. Then you have the direct method, which was kind of a reaction against grammar translation. It immerses students by encouraging English-only use in practical, everyday contexts, focusing heavily on conversational skills and spontaneous interaction. Think role-playing, asking for directions.
Right, learning by doing and speaking.
Exactly. And while these older methods definitely have limitations, maybe less focus on truly natural communicative use outside the classroom, or sometimes being too rigid, they are still considered valuable when integrated thoughtfully with more modern approaches. They can provide a balanced, comprehensive learning experience.
You don't just toss them out entirely.
No, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. For instance, that strong grammatical foundation from grammar translation can provide a really useful framework before you dive into the more fluid, less structured conversational practice encouraged by the direct method or newer approaches.
Okay, so that leads us directly to modern and interactive strategies. These sound more dynamic.
They often are, yes. One really powerful modern strategy is task-based language teaching, or TBLT.
Task-based, okay.
Forget endless grammar drills in isolation. TBLT focuses on using language to accomplish meaningful tasks rather than just rote memorization of forms. It encourages real-life activities where you have to use English to achieve a specific outcome.
Can you give an example of a task?
Sure. Imagine you're learning English, and your task is to plan a hypothetical weekend trip with a partner, all in English. You'd have to research destinations online, maybe compare hotel prices, discuss an itinerary, perhaps even role-play booking tickets or asking about local attractions.
So the focus is on completing the task using whatever language you have.
Exactly. It's not initially about perfect grammar. It's about communication, negotiation, getting the job done. This approach forces you to apply your language in practical, problem-solving ways, which builds confidence and real-world proficiency much faster than just studying rules.
I like that. What else is modern and interactive?
Blended learning is huge now. It ingeniously combines online digital resources, videos, interactive exercises, apps with traditional face-to-face classroom instruction.
Best of both worlds.
That's the idea. It offers incredible flexibility and allows for much more personalized learning, catering better to individual needs, learning styles, and paces.
And we saw a case study about this.
Yes, a fascinating one where blended learning effectively addressed the problem of limited resources in some rural schools. By using online platforms, students got access to expert content, native speaker videos, and interactive exercises that just wouldn't have been available locally. It really fostered personalized learning for students who might otherwise have been underserved. It's a powerful democratizer of education.
That's great. And even more cutting edge.
Adaptive learning technologies. These are really at the forefront. These systems use sophisticated algorithms, often AI-driven, to create completely customized learning paths based on your individual progress and proficiency level.
So the system learns about me as I learn.
Precisely. It identifies your strengths and weaknesses in real time through your answers to questions or performance on exercises. Then it tailors the next piece of content, the next activity, the next explanation to exactly what you need at that specific moment. It optimizes the learning process by ensuring you're always working on the right level of challenge. Not too easy to be boring, not too hard to be frustrating.
Preventing boredom and overwhelm. Very cool. Now let's shift perspective slightly and delve into the cognitive approaches. These are more about understanding how our brains actually learn a new language, right?
Exactly. It's about aligning teaching methods with cognitive science. Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, for example, is very influential here. It emphasizes the importance of comprehensible input.
Comprehensible input, meaning?
Meaning exposing yourself to language reading or listening that's just slightly beyond your current level of understanding. He called it I+1, where I is your current level. It needs to be challenging enough to introduce new things, but still mostly understandable from context so you're not totally lost.
So you can kind of figure out the new bits.
Yes. The idea is that this helps you internalize the language naturally, subconsciously, much like how a child acquires their first language, rather than through explicit rule memorization alone.
Okay. What else from cognitive science?
Building on that, Merrill Swain's output hypothesis suggests input isn't enough. You also need to produce language, to speak or write. Trying to express yourself forces you to notice gaps in your knowledge and pushes you to use language more accurately and complexly.
And then there's the interaction hypothesis.
Right, from Michael Long. This highlights the crucial role of interactive communication. It's not enough just to listen or read passively or even just speak into the void. Engaging in meaningful conversations facilitates acquisition.
How so?
Because interaction provides opportunities to practice, get immediate feedback, clarify meaning when you don't understand negotiation of meaning, and adjust your own language to be understood by others. When you have to rephrase something or ask a question to check your understanding, your brain is actively processing and strengthening those linguistic pathways.
And the noticing hypothesis.
That's from Richard Schmidt. It basically posits that learners must consciously notice specific linguistic features in the input they receive in order to actually acquire them effectively. It's not enough for the input to just wash over you.
You have to pay attention.
You have to actively pay attention to, say, a new grammar structure someone uses, or a specific pronunciation pattern, or a new vocabulary word, and make a mental note of it. That act of noticing helps move it from just input into something your brain starts to process for learning.
So these cognitive approaches, comprehensible input, interaction, noticing, they're all about making learning more aligned with how our brains naturally work.
Exactly. It's about working with your brain's processing mechanisms, not against them, making the whole process more intuitive and effective.
But learning isn't just a purely cognitive thing, is it? Our feelings get involved too.
Oh, massively. That's where effective approaches come in, focusing on the emotional dimension of learning. Our sources are crystal clear on this. Motivation and engagement are absolutely crucial. They're the fuel for sustained effort and ultimately for success.
If you're not motivated, even the best methods won't work.
They'll just fall flat. You won't put in the time or the effort.
So how do we boost motivation from an effective perspective?
Well, our sources frequently reference self-determination theory in this context. It's a major psychological theory about motivation.
Self-determination theory. Okay.
It basically says that to boost intrinsic motivation, the kind that comes from within, because you want to do it, you need to fulfill 3 core human psychological needs.
What are they?
The need for autonomy, feeling like you have choices and are in control of your learning. The need for competence, feeling capable, effective, like you're actually getting better. And the need for relatedness, feeling connected to others, like you belong to a community or have supportive relationships in your learning context.
Autonomy, competence, relatedness.
Yeah.
ACR.
Exactly. When your learning environment, whether it's an app, a classroom, a tutor, or even just your own study plan, nurtures these 3 needs, your motivation tends to skyrocket. This leads to greater proficiency, more persistence, and really more personal growth. It's all about creating a truly supportive and empowering emotional environment for learning.
That makes sense. It's not just about the brain, it's about the heart too.
Absolutely.
And beyond the individual's feelings, there's the power of interacting with others. Let's talk about social approaches.
Yes, the social dimension is huge in language learning. Lev Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, for instance, is very influential here. It states that learning, including language development, is deeply embedded in social interactions and cultural practices.
So we learn through others.
Largely, yes. Learners build skills through collaborative activities, discussions, and guidance from more knowledgeable individuals. Teachers, peers, tutors, even helpful members of an online community. We learn by interacting within a social context.
And that leads to specific teaching methods.
It does. Communicative language teaching, or CLT, is a major approach rooted in this idea. It prioritizes using language for actual communication in real-life situations, rather than just focusing on grammatical accuracy in isolation or doing drills.
So more role plays, discussions, information gap activities.
Exactly. The goal of CLT is to develop your ability to communicate effectively and appropriately within various social contexts. Can you order food politely? Can you participate in a discussion respectfully? Can you negotiate a solution in a work meeting?
Functional schools.
Functional skills. These social approaches foster authentic and functional language use, bridging that critical gap between knowing about the language, theoretical knowledge, and being able to actually use the language effectively in the real world. Practical application.
Okay, that's a great overview of methods.
Ah,
But we absolutely cannot talk about modern language learning without diving into technology-enhanced learning, the digital frontier.
no way. Technology has completely reshaped the landscape. Language learning apps like Duolingo, Babbel, Memrise, they're prime examples. They offer interactive exercises, gamified activities to make it fun, immediate feedback.
Points, streaks, leaderboards.
All of that. They make learning accessible and enjoyable, turning language practice into a daily habit that many people actually look forward to rather than dread.
And they're particularly effective in certain contexts.
Yes, the research suggests they're highly effective, particularly in urban settings where smartphone access is widespread. They offer incredible flexibility for busy lifestyles. You can learn on your commute, during a coffee break, whenever you have a few spare minutes.
Beyond the big apps, what else?
Online language exchange platforms are fantastic. Sites like Tandem, HelloTalk, italki, they facilitate real-time communication with native speakers from all over the globe.
So you're actually talking to real people.
Exactly. You practice your conversational skills, get authentic feedback, gain invaluable cultural insights, and can even make new friends. It's about authentic interaction.
And for something really immersive, really cutting edge.
Virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR, are starting to make waves. They can provide truly immersive environments for practicing English in simulated real-world settings.
Like what?
Imagine putting on a VR headset and practicing ordering coffee in a virtual Parisian cafe, or navigating the London Underground asking for directions, or even giving a presentation in a simulated boardroom all in English, in a safe, repeatable environment.
Wow, that sounds amazing for reducing real-world anxiety.
It really does. It enhances practical skills and contextual understanding in a way that traditional methods just can't replicate.
And AI is playing a bigger role, too.
Oh, absolutely. AI-powered tools are becoming incredibly sophisticated. They can tailor assessments to learner needs automatically, providing clear snapshots of student abilities in specific areas that need further focus, giving you incredibly precise, personalized feedback.
You mentioned an app earlier, FLOW Speak.
Yes. FLOW Speak is a great example. It uses AI voice technology to give you basically unlimited speaking practice. You talk to the AI, and it gives you instant feedback on your pronunciation, your fluency, your grammar, your word choice. It's like having a patient tutor available 24/7.
That's powerful. What about specific pronunciation help?
There's computer-assisted instruction, or CAI, specifically designed for pronunciation training. This often provides electronic visual feedback, or EVF.
Visual feedback, like seeing my voice.
Kind of. It might show you waveforms of your speech compared to a native speaker's, or pitch contours, or even diagrams showing the correct tongue position for a difficult sound like that English throat. It draws your attention visually to exactly what needs to change physically in your mouth or throat.
So putting it all together, what's the big picture with technology?
Technology is making language learning more interactive, more flexible, more personalized, more data-driven, and often more efficient than ever before. It's truly transforming how we approach language acquisition, moving it from a potentially solitary endeavor to a globally connected, highly adaptable experience.
Fantastic. So we've covered mindset, the language itself, the hurdles, and now this amazing toolkit of strategies. Let's bring it all together in part 5. The micro-scale advantage, sustaining motivation, and tracking real progress.
Yes, this is where we connect the dots, especially focusing on adult learners.
Because adults face different challenges than kids learning a language, right?
They really do. Our sources highlight several distinct challenges. Adults often juggle many other responsibilities, jobs, families, bills, social commitments, which can severely limit their available time and mental energy for dedicated study.
Life gets in the way.
It really does. Plus, adults tend to be more self-conscious and less sure of themselves compared to younger, often less inhibited students. That fear of making a mistake, of looking foolish in front of others, can be a significant barrier to actually practicing and taking risks.
And past experiences can haunt them.
Definitely. Prior negative educational experiences, maybe a bad language class in high school that left them feeling incompetent, can impact their confidence and willingness to engage again. If you failed once, you might doubt your ability to succeed now. Building confidence and fostering a consistently positive environment is absolutely crucial for adult learners.
Which brings us back to motivation. It's the engine, right?
It's absolutely the engine of language acquisition. The research is overwhelming. Sustained motivation directly leads to better learning outcomes. It's what drives consistent effort and deep engagement.
And motivated learners behave differently.
They do. Highly motivated learners are proactive. They set clear goals for themselves. They actively seek out opportunities to practice, even outside of formal lessons. They persevere through inevitable challenges and setbacks. And they consistently dedicate the necessary time to their studies, even when life gets hectic.
And this motivation can lead to becoming a more independent learner.
That's a fascinating connection our sources make. Increased motivation often leads directly to more autonomous learning. Learners start to take charge of their own education. They actively seek out resources, experiences, and methods that align with their personal interests and goals, rather than just passively receiving whatever instruction is given.
So they tailor it to themselves.
Exactly. This self-directed approach allows you to customize your study methods to your unique preferences, making the process more relevant, more enjoyable, and ultimately more effective. Plus, you develop invaluable transferable skills along the way: critical thinking, problem solving, self-discipline skills that benefit you far beyond just language learning.
Okay, so motivation is critical, especially for adults. How do we keep that motivation humming along, especially when progress can feel slow?
This is where the powerful concept of microscale progress reporting comes in. Our sources suggest this is truly a game changer for sustained motivation.
Microscale progress reporting. Break that down.
It refers to the frequent, detailed, and often informal assessment of small, incremental steps in learning. Instead of just relying on big, infrequent evaluations like midterms or end-of-course tests that only tell you where you stand every few months.
Which can be discouraging if you don't do well.
Exactly. Microscale reporting focuses intensely on recognizing and tracking those small, measurable gains you make day to day or week to week.
What does that look like in practice? Key aspects.
Well, it involves frequent check-ins, maybe daily or weekly quick assessments, not just major exams. You get highly specific feedback on particular skills, not just improve your speaking, but maybe focus on using past tense verbs more consistently or work on the pronunciation of the R sound this week.
So you know exactly what to work on.
Precisely. It uses varied assessment tools, quick quizzes, short oral presentations, informal conversations, self-recordings, maybe even just a teacher's brief observation notes. And crucially, this detailed, ongoing feedback directly enables personalized learning, allowing instruction to be tailored to your unique individual needs in near real time.
And how does this impact motivation?
Hugely. It helps you set realistic, highly achievable short-term goals. Seeing that you can master that tricky grammar point this week or successfully use 5 new vocabulary words today is incredibly encouraging. It builds momentum.
What are some other benefits?
Well, beyond motivation, microscale reporting provides invaluable data for teachers, enabling data-driven decision-making in their planning and instruction. It also strongly encourages self-reflection in learners, helping you understand your own strengths and weaknesses, track your progress, and take increasing ownership of your learning journey. And it facilitates clearer communication about progress between learners, teachers, and maybe even sponsors like employers, ensuring everyone is on the same page.
So the benefits for the learner are pretty substantial. Immediate feedback.
Yes, immediate feedback is key. You identify and correct mistakes before they become deeply ingrained habits. This instantly boosts confidence because you see your progress happening in real time, which in turn makes you more likely to participate actively, ask questions, and take those necessary risks with the language, knowing you'll get timely guidance.
And that sense of achievement.
It's powerful. Breaking down big, daunting objectives like fluency into manageable, bite-sized microtasks allows you to regularly experience the satisfaction of meeting small goals. This reinforces that crucial growth mindset, the belief that your abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, making you see challenges as opportunities to learn, not reasons to quit.
And it keeps you engaged.
Definitely. Regular check-ins, a core part of microscale reporting, profoundly enhance engagement. Knowing your progress is being monitored in a supportive way keeps you involved and accountable. It makes you more focused and committed to your language learning journey. And this consistent engagement, fueled by visible progress, leads directly to significantly better overall outcomes and sustained motivation over the long haul.
Okay, this sounds really promising. How do we actually implement microscale reporting in practice? Where do we start?
It starts with setting clear, attainable micro goals. As we discussed, instead of vague aims like improve English grammar, you'd set a target like, this week I will master the use of the present perfect tense in conversations about recent experiences. Or for pronunciation, my goal for the next 2 days is improving the pronunciation of the sound in common words like think and this by practicing for 10 minutes each day using this specific app.
Breaking it down small.
Breaking objectives down into these small, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART targets is incredibly effective. It builds confidence and maintains motivation because you experience immediate, measurable wins frequently.
And how do we track this progress? What tools or techniques work well?
There's a fantastic range of tools available now. Digital tools are highly effective, as we mentioned. Apps like FLOW, Speak with its AI voice tech and progress dashboard, are perfect for tracking pronunciation and fluency improvements. Online learning platforms, like those used by Bridge for their TEFL courses, allow students to submit specific assignments, maybe a short rating sample or a recorded speaking task, and receive timely, detailed comments from instructors pinpointing areas for micro-level improvement. Tools like TutorBird for independent tutors or Classin for online classes also facilitate this kind of granular tracking and communication.
But it's not just about high-tech stuff, right? Low-tech works too.
Absolutely. Analog methods are still incredibly valuable, especially for fostering self-reflection. You can keep a dedicated learning journal to reflect on daily or weekly achievements, noting new vocabulary you used successfully, grammar patterns you finally understood, or even just successful conversations you managed to have.
That sounds really useful for consolidating learning.
It is. Progress charts, whether physical on your wall or digital, can visually represent your milestones, providing a quick, encouraging snapshot of how far you've come. And classic flashcards are still highly effective for self-study of vocabulary or grammar points, allowing you to continually update your sets as you master items, making the learning tactile and reinforcing memory. These hands-on methods engage different learning styles and help you track those incremental improvements in a very personal way.
And involving the student themselves is key.
Paramount. Student involvement is crucial for microscale reporting to be truly effective. Regular self-assessment, perhaps using checklists or guided questions, allows you to evaluate your own progress, identify your own strengths, pinpoint areas you feel need more work, and set personalized goals that genuinely resonate with your learning style and objectives.
What about peer feedback?
Peer feedback sessions are also wonderful. They create a collaborative environment where students give and receive constructive criticism on specific microskills, maybe pronunciation of certain sounds or use of specific vocabulary. This encourages active listening, critical thinking, and empathy, all vital skills for language development in authentic social contexts. Plus, explaining something to someone else is a great way to solidify your own understanding.
And the teacher's role in all this, it sounds pivotal.
It absolutely is. The teacher acts as a guide, facilitator, and feedback provider. They need to provide varied feedback, quick verbal comments during class, detailed written notes on assignments, perhaps more structured progress reports, always balancing positive reinforcement with specific constructive commentary.
Any tips for giving good feedback?
Yes, our sources offer some great tips. For instance, when giving corrective feedback, maybe start with a positive comment about something the student did well. Structure critical comments into specific actionable goals, not just this is wrong, but try focusing on X next time. And make sure to praise mastery of complex subjects or noticeable effort to build confidence.
And teachers should encourage reflection.
Definitely. They should actively encourage learner reflection, perhaps by providing prompts for those journals, using self-evaluation checklists, or structuring guided peer feedback discussions. This fosters learner autonomy, that sense of control and intrinsic motivation.
And they use the data from this tracking.
Yes, that's the final piece. Teachers use the progress data gathered through microscale reporting to constantly adjust their teaching methods and materials. By tracking performance at this granular level, they can quickly spot common difficulties across a group, see if particular individuals are struggling with a specific point, or identify when certain strategies aren't working. This allows them to modify lesson plans, introduce different techniques, bring in supplementary resources, creating a truly responsive and effective learning environment that adapts dynamically to the learner's evolving needs.
We saw a great real-world example of this, right? The Bridge Corporate Language Learning case study.
Yes, that was a fantastic illustration. Bridge provides business English courses and develops highly personalized learning pathways for their corporate clients using exactly this kind of micro-scale progress tracking.
How do they structure it?
They leverage global standards frameworks like the Global Scale of English, GSE, and the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, CEFR. These aren't just vague levels. They break down language proficiency into incredibly precise, actionable, can-do statements across all skills. Bridge actually uses these to define 18 unique proficiency levels, allowing them to set very specific micro and macro goals for learners.
So it's super granular.
Super granular. They then use resources like Pearson's Business Partner online textbook series, assigning specific sections, exercises, or activities based on each learner's personalized pathway and their current micro goals. So if an executive needs to improve their presentation skills,
Their pathway targets that specifically.
exactly. Their pathway would target specific vocabulary for presentations, intonation patterns for engaging an audience, sentence structures for formal speaking, and their progress would be tracked frequently on these very specific elements through targeted tasks and assessments.
And the results.
The outcome is impressive. It fast-tracks learning by focusing intensely on the most relevant skills for that individual's job. It motivates learners because they see the direct, visible impact on their career performance. And it provides robust, quantifiable data back to the company's stakeholders, clearly demonstrating the return on their investment in language training. It's a win-win-win.
That's a powerful model. But surely, implementing this micro-scale approach isn't always easy. Are there challenges?
Of course, no approach is perfect, and there are potential challenges. It can be quite time-consuming for teachers, especially in larger classes, requiring them to develop frequent, varied assessments and provide highly individualized, differentiated feedback for each student.
And for the learners.
There's also a risk of overwhelming learners if it's not handled well. Constant checks and assessments, if they feel punitive or overly critical, could potentially cause anxiety or make learning feel like a constant test, which would undermine motivation.
So what are the solutions? How do we mitigate those challenges?
The key is a balanced approach. You need to integrate microscale tracking seamlessly with broader macro learning goals, ensuring it contributes meaningfully to the overall journey without becoming a distraction or an administrative burden.
Tailor it.
Definitely tailor assessments to individual learner needs and progress. Don't just apply a blanket approach. Focus only on the areas most relevant to that learner's current stage and goals. And critically, leverage technology wisely.
Those AI tools again?
Exactly. AI-powered digital tools like quizzes, classpoint.io, or specialized language platforms can provide personalized, often gamified, and less intrusive assessment opportunities that save teachers immense time while still giving clear, real-time snapshots of student abilities and areas needing focus. It's about being smart, supportive, and strategic in how you implement it.
Okay. So to wrap up this really comprehensive deep dive, English learning is indeed a multifaceted journey, isn't it? Not just a static destination.
Absolutely.
And it absolutely requires cultivating the right mindset from day one: patience, persistence, embracing mistakes.
That inner game is crucial.
Then you need to understand the specific linguistic hurdles you might face, those tricky bits of pronunciation and rhythm, the complex grammar, the absolute maze of idioms and phrasal verbs.
Knowing the enemy, so to speak.
Exactly. And crucially, you need to employ a multifaceted, strategic approach, combining everything from those foundational methods, modern interactive strategies like TBLT, understanding the cognitive and affective sides of learning, embracing social interaction,
And leveraging technology.
and definitely leveraging the incredible power of technology. But perhaps above all, staying consistently motivated, especially through the power of recognizing your own progress using microscale tracking. That can truly make all the difference. It turns aspiration into tangible achievement.
Well said. You, our listener, now hopefully have a much deeper understanding of how to approach English learning effectively, not just what specific grammar point to learn next. You have a more detailed roadmap, hopefully, to navigate the complexities, maintain your momentum, and sustain your motivation through every step of your linguistic journey.
So let's leave you with a final provocative thought to consider as you continue your own language journey. In a world where English is constantly evolving, shaped by global communication and incredibly diverse accents, what does mastery truly look like for you? Is it really about achieving some elusive, perhaps unattainable, perfect native-like pronunciation and flawless grammar?
Or is it perhaps more about confident, intelligible, and effective communication? Communication that truly bridges cultures, opens up new opportunities, and allows you to connect with others.
What one micro goal, however small it might seem, will you set for yourself today, right now, to start your next breakthrough in English?